One thing I want to ask all of you guys about is about doing research when you're creating characters. Like, do you, obviously Pedro was your friend, but you also had to research his life. I was also thinking of, Greg. One of the things I noticed when you did the Batwoman character, you actually got Lieutenant Dan Choi to it's actually kind of a.
That was before he was Lieutenant Dan Choi.
Oh.
Yeah, it's funny. I finished my last interview with him 2 weeks before he went on Mad Out and announced.
How did you find him in the first place? To be clear, Lieutenant Dan Choi is he's part of a group called Nights Out.
You guys don't know who Lieutenant Dan Choi is, you should.
Nights Out, it's a group that tries to repeal the Mass Don't Tell.
Dan Choi is a West Point graduate. He is a graduate of the United States Military Academy. I want to say class of 2002, I believe, or 2003. And he actually appears as a National Geographic documentary called Surviving the Point. And in the first episode, he is, I think juniors were called cows. He's the cow that one of the cadets comes down the hall on orientation and he just rips them apart in the most cliche drill sergeant Bush fashion you can imagine. How I found him is an anecdote. It has less to do with research than serendipity. I got in touch with a college friend via Facebook. Thus far as the only worth that Facebook has proven to have. And this friend of mine I had been out of touch with since graduation, and he had come out shortly after graduating and moved to Hawaii and fallen in love with a very nice man. And apparently they were quite happy together for quite a while, and then his partner passed away from AIDS. And as we had been catching up with each other, it was just like, sorry I haven't been in touch, and so on and so forth. And about a week later, the research for the issue in particular that you're talking about was research that took 6 months. I researched that, I read like 8 books, I conducted interviews with all sorts of graduates. The most comic scripts for me, we're talking about a 22-page DC comic, would be, and these were 20 pages. There may be going to be 40 printed pages in the format. They would be maybe, if we talk about data bits, 500 kilobytes. The script for that issue is like a 9.5 megabyte script. It is like nearly 100 pages. It's full of reference. I've been doing the research, and I think I just posted on Facebook. I'm looking at anybody tell me about being gay at West Point. And
that must have brought you to some very interesting websites.
You get interesting responses. And Rob contacted me and he said, I'm in a men's choir with a guy who graduated West Point, and I know he's queer. You want me to reach out to him? And I was like, yes, desperately, please. And Dan and I had, like I said, we did about 8 to 9 hours of conversations over a couple of nights. And it was just as, and now looking back on it, I realized that he was using me very much. I think I think what he did is incredibly right. And I think, and this guy is a combat trained soldier who led troops in Iraq. This man is not in any way, shape, or form lacking in courage. And we talked, and as we talked, it became clear where he was going when he was starting to talk about Nights Out. And then, lo and behold, I turned out, and there he is. And I was like, oh boy.
So maybe you helped him construct his narrative too, and so on.
I'm not going to take any credit for what he did. It's interesting to me. One of the things West Point says they do is they create leaders. And he is, without doubt. So, like I said, that's serendipity. And the flip side is there are military people I know, and I'll shut up about this, who I asked the same question to. There was a sergeant I know in intelligence, and I said, you know anybody who was at West Point that I could talk to about, the queer culture there? Because it was there, it had to be there. And he came back and said, well, we've got a new first lieutenant, we've got a new lieutenant from West Point, I'll ask her. But I've got to wait for the right time, because you don't just turn around and say, so when you were at the point. And apparently, when he finally broached it to her, you know, he said something like, so, you know, I mean, what was the queer culture like? And she said, oh yeah, everybody made the rugby team was queer. See, and that to me is incredibly interesting. It's like we're still fighting over data, and yet they know. I mean, it's not like anything's going. It always reminds me of the line in Casablanca. You know, there's gambling here.
Well, it's also a very interesting political statement, I think, to say, to say that the origin story of the superhero is basically that she becomes a vigilante precisely because she is not allowed to serve her country in the way that she wanted to.
Yeah, and well, that was very deliberate. And it's funny because when I, you know, Michael Spillane and J.H. Williams and I really worked on those issues for a very long time. And Spillane and I, who was the editor, spent a lot of time talking about it. But one of the very first things that sort of was sui generis for me about Kate was I knew, and I don't know why, but almost immediately when I started thinking about who she is, I saw the West Point scene. I don't know why I saw the West Point scene. That was the sui generis scene. I always knew from the very start I was going to write that scene where she has to look, you know, this major in the eye and say, I walked past a cadet shall not lie, cheat, or steal, nor suffer others to do so. I've done that for 4 years. And you're asking me to say I'm not gay. And I knew that scene I knew was going to be there where she would take the ring off and say, I will not betray myself.
Gail, was there any sui generis moment with Scandal or the creation of that character? Was that like a moment that you knew that she was who she was going to end up being in your next story?
I think I've probably talked about this before, but from the very beginning, I knew Scandal was going to be gay, but I had seen that scene where she was writing a love letter sitting on her bed, writing a love letter on her laptop, and I knew that a lot of the readers would assume that she was writing to a man because it wasn't revealed yet, and I knew that it was going to be revealed, and so I definitely had that in mind from the beginning that we were going to have a scene like that where that was going to be revealed.
We're going to be taking questions from the audience pretty soon, so if you guys would like to line up, we have a microphone here, so if anyone wants to ask any questions. One thing is that we will be taping this for YouTube and whatever. So if you don't want to be filmed, please talk to Andy beforehand, before you get up and actually ask your questions. That guy who's doing the camera work here. So thank you. I wanted to also ask, I mean, we take for granted that I think now we can actually create, queer characters, even in a mainstream context. That was not always true, obviously, and I wanted to kind of ask Howard, you and Gilbert about trying to create queer characters initially, kind of earlier on, and any kind of pushback you might have gotten from that. Howard, I know that you essentially came out of it by creating gay comics. Was that?
Yes, I had done my first gay story was in 1976, but that didn't commit myself to being gay. That just said I could have been a straight liberal.
We love those.
But it was really when Dennis asked me to get into gay comics that I decided I'd been planning to be out from quite early in the 70s, and I was trying to find the right moment for it. And I really liked doing it in connection with announcing that I was going to edit gay comics because there was no confessional sense. It was not like, oh, I've got this terrible secret and now I'm going to reveal it. It was necessary, I think, for the editor of gay comics to be gay in order to have the trust of people who would be taking chances with their careers if they participated. So, I just said, in my letter that I sent out to people in general, I said, I know many gay people have feared to include their gayness in their work for these fears, and I felt that being a gay person, I felt that myself, and I felt that was That way I was able to get the information out there without making a big deal of it. And,
And you didn't necessarily know at that point who was queer or queer friendly?
no, I didn't. That was why it was such an interesting, I just had to put a blanket statement out to everybody on Dennis Kitchen's mailing list, saying, we don't know who's gay. If you're not, give it to the, a gay cartoonist, give it to him or her. And it worked out.
But you did have actually some straight cartoonists in the beginning, like Trina Robbins. And,
I did.
oh, okay, that was Robert.
Robert Triptow opened the doors to gay-friendly straight cartoonists. I was particularly concerned about the fact that there had been this lack of a platform for gays and lesbians, and so my feeling was I was going to give them priority.
Right, okay.
Eventually, the series went on and developed somewhat larger number of contributors.
Paige, you were also in early gay comics as well, right?
Yeah, I was just having a little flashback when he was talking about that, because I dug out, I was going through an old box of comics today, and dug out the issue that I was in, and I thought, wow, my work was so bad. But while you were talking, I was thinking, the reason I think my work was so bad back then is I was scared to be very honest. I wasn't very honest in my work. I was definitely walking some line of not really committing to being fully who I was, and I think part of that was being in the Deep South, and I wondered how long it took you to shake your cultural background off, so to speak.
Well, I got a lot of that had gone by the wayside from a lot of acid trip.
I never tried that.
But interesting, I will say one thing real quick about how, the rapist I was and everything. At the identical time that I did my first gay story in Graveyard Gay, I also did another story called How Barefoots Was Created, which was a sort of a mock truthful account of how I developed that character. But at the end of it, I showed myself with a female that anyone would perceive and assume to be my girlfriend, without saying she was, but it was a little bit of, I'm a little back into the closet here. It took some back and forth quite to say, okay, I am firmly out, but I've always been embarrassed. I mentioned that I have this new collection called From Headback to Claude, which has all of my gay comics other than Wendell and Stuff Over Lady in it. And I talk about, that's a panel that embarrasses me to this day. And on my website, I have an adaptation of that strip in which I do it right, and it's another guy. But, most of us in this room who are gay probably have some moments that embarrass us when we were teetering back and forth on the brink of the closet.